Hey guys, this is Integrated. My name is Angela Erickson, and this is the podcast where we seek to bridge the gap between the intellect and the will so that we can grow as disciples of Christ, surrendering all that we are and all that we have to the truth. My name is Angela Erickson, and today I'm sharing an interview I did with Chris Lewis. He is the myth, the man, the legend behind Baritus Catholic. I love his artwork. He's just a phenomenal illustrator, and I have a lot of his stuff. Actually, one of my kids broke the frame for this print of Saint Joseph, but I have others as well. I need to get that back up on the wall. We have Saint Joseph Terror of Demons. My phone case is his. I have all of our bumper stickers on my sweet mom van are his. And other things too, including a shirt of his that I'm pretty sure just gets washed and thrown back on over and over and over again. I'm not sure it knows what my closet or dresser looks like at this point. So anyway, I really love his stuff, and we sat down to talk about his conversion to Catholicism and how he kind of came to this place where he decided that he was going to give glory to God for all in and through all of his artwork, or most of it anyway. I think it happened pretty organically for him, it sounds like, but I really hope that you guys go and patronize him. He's just a phenomenal human being. It was just a real pleasure to talk to him about beauty and the importance of beauty and all kinds of stuff. It was just a really fun interview. So be sure to check the description box. You can find his shop on there. Get something awesome. He's got really great merchandise and artwork. So make sure you go there. Also, make sure you're following on YouTube so you can watch this. Hit the bell so you get notified when I go live. Also, and I'm just going to keep saying it, make sure you're subscribed on podcast. Whatever you're listening to, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, whatever. Make sure you're subscribed. And please, if you are able to, give it a review. That would help so much. And as always, you are welcome to check out my Patreon. Consider becoming a supporter so that we can help offset the costs of putting together this podcast and maintaining a website, all that stuff. I'd love to provide more content and do more for you guys. So thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Integrated, and I hope you enjoy my interview with Chris Lewis. Thank you, Chris, for coming on to Integrated. I have been wanting to interview you for a very long time. I've been a fan of your work for years, and I'm just really excited to share with our listeners more about you and your story and, of course, your artwork. Thanks for coming on the show.
No, it's my pleasure. This is awesome, and it's great to finally connect and get to talk about some of my favorite things, the faith and art. So, I love being here. Thank you.
So when you started doing artwork, did you start as a kid? What did that look like for you? I mean, first of all, I'd love to know more about you and your family, all that stuff. And then I really kind of want to dive into the background of how you got started.
Yeah, so I'll give I guess the short version of the story is I'm kind of like a transplant from all over. We were a military family, so I never really grew up in one single place. We grew up everywhere until I met my wife, and then we got married and kind of settled down in here outside of Atlanta for now the 20 years, I think. So this is the longest I've been anywhere. And we have 5 kids, and now we're running this business Baritus full time from here, and that's basically the background of our family life here. But as far as art, I mean, that's something that that was probably the one consistent I had throughout my life. So the location I lived in was changing constantly, but I was always just that kid, either sprawled out on the floor drawing with some crayons when I was really little, or possibly just hunched over my desk in my teenage years, just sketching nonstop. And eventually, actually, in my teenage years, I got into computer art. So I started doing a lot of that sort of thing. And I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with my life until I met my wife and started to get my life together. And I thought, maybe I should do something professionally with art. And so I went back to art school and eventually went into graphic design, which, it was a little bit easier back in those days to make a stable living doing that rather than an illustrator. We didn't have social media and ways to instantly connect to people and make
Yeah.
network connections and things like that. So, graphic design was the road I went, but I realized after about 15 to 17 years of doing that it just wasn't like my heart wasn't in it. Like, it was creative, but it wasn't the same as me illustrating. And that's what I really was drawn to for most of my life. That's what I spent my young years doing. And so it was only recently with the convergence of me really having a conversion to Catholicism and having that become the center of my life. And then also at the same time, after having a series of conversions, wanting to get back into drawing just as an exercise in something cathartic for me. And so those two things converged, and they kind of led me down this path of establishing, at the time, I didn't intend to start a company. It just kind of happened. God gave me a gift there, and I started to see there were some fruits there, and there was a clear path to do it. So now, I've left the graphic design world behind more or less, to do or to pursue Catholic illustration full time and support my family doing this work and doing what I love, which is sharing the faith and the beauty of the faith through art. And so
That's absolutely incredible. So, I mean, you kind of alluded to this, but you had a conversion to Catholicism, so you weren't raised Catholic then. Would you mind kind of expounding on that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I wasn't raised Catholic at all. And in fact, if I had picked up anything of Catholicism over the years, it was sort of the things that you hear as a Catholic from time to time, like, oh, it's a cult, or we worship Mary, and those sort of things. Because my family was all Protestant, like going back, my grandparents and everything. They were all Protestant, and not particularly of one denomination or another. And in fact, as being a military family, every time we moved around, my parents would find the church that was the one that felt right for them. And so we saw a lot of different Protestant denominations over the years, but eventually settled into like the mega church, evangelical sort of churches out in Southern California. And so early on, like elementary school and middle school, like that's what we were attending. But I started to have some really serious doubts about the Bible, the nature of the Bible. How do we know that what we're reading here in English is what we think it means? And how do we know where the Bible came from? What are the origins of how do we trust its reliability and the authenticity of Scripture, and these sorts of questions.
So, did you leave Christianity then at any point?
Yeah, I would say
Okay.
I made a definite break in probably my late middle school years. Definitely by high school, like I was out of it. And honestly, there wasn't a real core of the faith in our family. Like it was very lukewarm, even in that. Like we talked about it. My parents might have talked about it, but we didn't really see it in action. There wasn't any kind of coalescing tradition that we practiced as a family. Although
Yeah.
sometimes we'd go to I almost said mass. Sometimes we'd go to church on Sundays, but sometimes we wouldn't. And so it just, I grew up at a time where like MTV culture was like the thing. And, we didn't have internet to this degree. Internet was just like, it was just like text only back in those days.
Right.
And yeah, I'm old. And so like these were like,
That much older than I am, probably.
okay, good. So like MTV was like became my idols, and music became my sacrament. And
Me
that for
too.
me
Yeah.
was what I did for years. And I just went headlong into that. And actually became quite, whether a product of just being saturated by all of this stuff and taking it in nonstop, I became quite hostile and antagonistic to Christianity, to the Christianity I knew, that Protestant, very American sort of Christianity. And I really didn't believe that there was a 2,000-year connection there. I really thought it was something very much part of just American culture that we've kind of hung on to, but it wasn't really doing it for me. And so, yeah, I did reject Christianity very strongly until I met my wife.
Yeah, I was going to ask, was it that your wife was a practicing Catholic when you met? And like, what was that like for you to go from being somewhat antagonistic to Christianity to meeting a devout Catholic? What drew you into her and her devout nature?
Yeah, her essentially.
She was pretty, wasn't she?
Right.
She is pretty.
She was pretty. She was like the most awesome girl I'd ever met. And it's like, okay. And I've kind of joked with her. I don't believe this now, but I wouldn't have cared what she was. She could have been Buddhist. I'm like, okay, I'll go check out, whatever you do as a Buddhist, right?
Right.
And it's God.
Love is blind,
That's,
right?
yeah. And it's kind of ironic. I had a lot of like angst and anger about certain things in my life, and
Mhm.
God using love as a way to kind of bring me back to the church was like
Mhm.
exactly the medicine I needed. So, I met her, and actually our first date, she said that she had to go to mass, and I was like, I don't know what mass is, but if you're going, I'm following you. And I have not missed a mass since that Sunday. So I went for years, like not even knowing what I was doing. And she was raised Catholic. She's actually from Lebanon. So she was raised in the
Mm.
Maronite rite, and that would come into play later in my conversion. Just sort of the connections I started making there to ancient Christianity. But
Yeah.
she was at that time she was in the Latin rite. So, but she even had her own experiences where she wasn't living the faith completely either. So we kind of mutually helped each other. As I began to learn the faith, she began to learn things that she was never really taught, because I started to find an interest in it. And I'm like, hey, did you know about this? And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about right now. So we kind of like, she brought me into the faith and opened the doorway to it, and at least let my heart be open to looking at Christianity through a different set of eyes. And I think mutually we kind of grew together in learning the true faith, because she was probably not catechized the best, and kind of had what a lot of Catholics unfortunately have today as far as an understanding of the faith, which is
Mm.
very kind of superficial, maybe
Yeah.
even hard to distinguish some of the secular attitudes that are there, and it's not really a core of the faith. But we went on that journey together, really, and kind of uncovered all these things, and it was great to, yeah, it was. I'm just blessed to have met her, and to, like, the two best things in my life happened at once: the Catholic faith and meeting her. So
That's so amazing. Oh, and I just love that too. Like, isn't that really what marriage is about, right? Like the two people coming together and growing closer, ordered towards God, ordered towards
yeah,
heaven, and leading each other that way. And because sometimes one person might be really strong and the other person isn't for whatever reason. Life is not linear. It's kind of messy sometimes. And so it's like you're always going back and forth, leaning on each other, but that constant growth closer together, ordered towards God, that Trinitarian love.
yeah.
Um, so when you converted, I mean, how did you manage to go from like graphic design, you have this conversion, and then you decided to start engaging in Catholic artwork? Was this something that you started maybe as a form of like prayer? I mean, because I could definitely see that working through things through art as a mode of prayer. Is that kind of what it was like for you, or how would you describe that transition?
Yeah, well, you were just saying life is not linear, and that has definitely been my experience. Like, it's just been all over the place. And
Yeah.
so I always say I had like three conversions, really. There was that first one where I was open to stepping back into a church for the first time, and looking at Christianity again. But it took a number of years before I had like an explosion of just like fire to understand the faith. And that kind of, you look back in life, and you just see God dropping or putting the trail in front of you, and you see the
Yeah.
breadcrumbs that trace back through all the steps in your life. I didn't see that in the moment. I was living day to day. But I had this big, just intellectual conversion at one point in time, and that was great until I hit a serious crisis in my life a number of years after we were married, and I converted. And that whole thing just kind of like, um, just knocked me out for like 5 years. I always
Mm.
say it was like my wrestling with the angel, from the Old Testament, Jacob and the angel
Yeah.
wrestling.
Your
Like
Dark Knight.
my dark night, like I had that
Yeah.
experience, and it was only through that I had that true, like, spiritual conversion,
Well,
where I
yeah,
was
like
like,
when the intellect and the will unite finally, because I think it's
yeah,
really easy. That's one thing when I started integrated. Like there's always this chasm in place between the intellect and the will because we're broken because of our fallen
yeah,
nature. And some people live totally by the will, and it can be very easily disordered when not tempered by the intellect. But
mhm,
on the kind of on the reverse side of that is like your intellect can assent to something, but your will is so unwilling. I mean, we read that in scripture, right? Like
yeah.
my what is it St. Paul or St. Peter?
I
It
buffet my body, it does what I do not wanna do, and
Yes,
yeah,
yep,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. No, so that was part of it, but it was also a part of it that I thought that the intellectual faith was the faith. So for a number of years, it
Mm,
was. I still didn't have this proper grounding of what the Christian life was. And so
Right.
I thought, well, if I just know all the things and I'm going to mass on Sunday, right, then I'm obviously a Christian. But
Right.
no, it was when God, like, whomped me over the head, and then I got knocked down to nothing. And I
Oh,
started to
amen.
look at my own life and say, I haven't been like truly picking up my cross and giving God everything to, surrender to divine providence and all of that. And that experience did that for me. So, yeah, sorry, this is a long, I'm making this long, but
No, no, this is great. Thank you for
okay, good.
sharing. It's an honor. I know it's hard, like those vulnerable moments when you're like talking about trial because, we all have them.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's easy to feel like you're the only one struggling with something. And it can be both cathartic and also it allows us to share in each other's suffering. So I think it's an honor.
Yeah, and you were talking earlier about how marriage, we help each other strive towards heaven. And when
Yeah.
I had my intellectual conversion, my wife still was kind of more of just the go to mass on Sundays and not like really into the faith that much. She was into the faith, but it still wasn't where it needed to be for us. And so
Right.
I was all on fire for all these new things I was learning, and she was like, well, she wasn't getting it. But then she had a spiritual conversion or a conversion. In fact, I think she had more of the spiritual side of it, but she didn't have the intellectual. So she had kind of the intellectual part of it come into play when I was having my spiritual crisis. And so
Hmm.
she kind of helped keep me steady there. And it was interesting how we kind of played off each other to keep each
Imbalanced. Yeah.
yeah,
God
to keep
knew what
each
he
other
was
balanced.
doing.
Right. And so at that point in time, we were taking a lot of trips to Europe, and because of what she was doing for a living at the time. And that's when I started going into the Catholic churches there and exploring, the ancient Christian traditions, the artistic legacy that was there. It was nothing like I would find here. I mean, I was used to going to Novus Ordo parishes that were
The
stripped bare.
felt banners.
The felt, you
So
know,
beautiful.
yeah, I have not been to a felt. Well, I
Oh
can't say that. I
man.
can't say that. I have been to a few.
We
Um,
the one I grew up in was very felt bannery, like I call it Catholic light.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
like the very Protestant area. And so yeah, all the felt banners and my science teacher strumming on the guitar for Sunday mass
yeah,
singing.
yeah.
Yeah. No,
It,
we
it it
had
looked a
that.
little too much like what I experienced at the mega churches to make me comfortable. So,
Yeah.
and actually, I'm probably that's not true completely. We have some really beautiful churches here in the Atlanta area, and so there was some art there. But when I went to Europe, it was nothing like what I was seeing here. I mean, I couldn't even like process it. And to think
Mm,
that you could walk around places like Rome and every single corner you turn, you're stepping into another church that's
beauty.
hundreds of
Yeah.
years old, that's covered from floor to ceiling. And so anyway, I was going through this struggle, and she was starting to encounter faith in her own way, and I was starting to encounter this pull towards the aesthetics again. And I found a healing in the aesthetics, which um, I don't even know if I can describe it, but it was something that it's like, this feels like home. Like, this is what, like, I understand this language. This is something that like really spoke to the heart. It wasn't me trying to understand intellectual arguments about
Mm.
why I'm suffering or, how to get through the suffering, but it was me seeing the suffering painted out in depictions across these churches. And I think that really started to pull my heart towards my youth to when I used to draw. And I thought, this is how I'm going to heal. Like, I need to express the beauty that I see here that maybe I'm not experiencing in my life because I'm in this trial. But that process is, it's almost its own exorcism of like creative demons I just need to get out. Only these are like blessed demons, or blessed demons, blessed
Bless you.
angels, blessed demons. No, I take that
Lord have
back. You
mercy.
can't edit this, can you?
I get it.
But you know what I mean? It was like,
Yeah.
the whatever was oppressing me in my suffering, I was able to kind of combat that through these blessed images, and through meditating on the holy things, and meditating on the faith and the higher reality, and the things I was called to really embracing suffering. And so yeah, sorry, I'm rambling, but that
No.
to get back to the story. I mean, that's what really started pulling me back to Catholic art. And so I started doing that. Just I'd come home late at nights from my graphic design job, and I would sit down and I would just start sketching and drawing some of these ideas, and really that's how everything kind of took off. And I didn't even anticipate to start a business. For me, it was just a way to kind of heal from some of the stuff I was going through and kind of process it and face it. And yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm for one very, very grateful that you started a business because I have a lot of your artwork in my home. In fact, your Sacred Heart shirt, I'm pretty sure I wear it. I mean, I wear it probably at least twice a week. Like the second it's washed and dried again, it doesn't even get folded up normally. I just put it back on.
Yeah.
I love it. And I love to like being able to wear that and people are interested in it because it's not, yeah, I just feel like art is just so much Catholic art lacks depth today, and it's ugly. It's not appealing. Like I look at a lot of the imagery of our Lord and I think I don't want to see another effeminate Jesus. Like I don't want to look at Jesus and think he looks almost like a woman because
Hmm.
he's been completely castrated of any masculine
Yeah.
no masculine features except for maybe like a sparse beard. You know, it's like
Not even
I
a
can't,
good beard.
it's not even a good beard. Yeah, like you and my husband have good beards, you know? So I'm like, I just want like a real man Jesus, you know? Because I can't imagine that I mean, I that's not how I visualize our Lord. He was the son of a carpenter. He was masculine. I mean, you pay attention to people who work with their hands a lot, like my husband, he's a lineman. So he grew up on a dairy farm. It's like his hands are huge. They're using their bodies all the time. They're very muscular
Mm.
and it's been really refreshing to see your artwork because I'm not getting effeminate Jesus. I'm getting like a strong male presence through the artwork. And not only that, but you've interwoven so many traditional um components to artwork. It's like I mean, I would love for you to explain how you would describe your artwork because like how did you develop your style and or was that just like always kind of your aesthetic? Like how did you develop that and how do you go about deciding what elements to incorporate into your artwork?
Yeah, well, before I get to that, it's interesting. I was just talking about the effeminate Jesus to somebody at Mass on one of these past Sundays, and it's true. Like you look at some of those Jesus images, and you would wonder how he ever got past the first fall, like
Seriously, I
carrying his
know.
cross after being beaten. It just didn't resonate with me. I wanted to show, the hardcore pick up your cross, gritty side of Catholicism, and there
Yeah.
is a gritty side because we're in a struggle, we're in a fight, and that's definitely what I was experiencing when I encountered all these things in this pull to doing art again. So when it came time to do it, I through my conversions, I became very so God just flipped everything on me. What I saw as like this attraction in the MTV culture in my youth, all of a sudden just became repulsive. I couldn't watch movies anymore because I was just turned off by all the degraded. I can't even call it art. Like I rarely see art in movies anymore. I don't hear it in music. I don't see it in the arts. Just as what the culture was giving. And so part of what I wanted to do was combat that with the things that I did experience in Europe and the things that I had since studied. Um, and you go into those churches and you see true, authentic goodness and beauty, and it's something that like modern society just needs, whether they know it or not. I never knew it, and I think sitting in those it's sitting in those different churches during mass, even when I wasn't Catholic yet, and just taking that in, really did something to my, for me, and just getting a perspective of what true beauty is. So when it came time for me to, determine what sort of images I wanted to create, I honestly didn't think about it too much. I was already drawn to the traditional work for all the reasons you've already mentioned. It's stronger, it's glorious, it raises your mind to heaven. And what I just couldn't stand were these religious images that brought the heavenly things down to earth and kind of made like Jesus just another dude that we're supposed to like, be friends with, and the saints were, making them look modern and things like that. Um, and when you want to talk about Catholicism in terms of art, where do you see that in modern churches? I don't. They're blank walls, or like you said, felt banners. When I want to be impressed and encouraged and enriched by the faith. I look back in history and I see it everywhere. So for me, just having been in graphic design for so long and so used to the digital process of creating, that came natural to me. But now I had a new uh, perspective I wanted to share through a digital medium. So I've always said, like, I want to stay true to those artistic traditions of the past. That's our legacy, that's our heritage. A lot of modern Catholics don't know about it because they're walking into empty churches, or they're looking at the feminine prayer cards that you can find in every Catholic store. And so I wanted to take these things but represent it for modern Catholics, essentially, but not in a modern way, in a way that does justice to the traditions.
Yeah, it's so funny. Sorry, and of course
No,
Veronica, she's like, I'm ready for a nap, Mom. But everyone who pays any mind to my work is very familiar with her.
Yeah, I'm ready for a nap too.
I know, girl, I feel you. But one thing that I have found really interesting, because I have family members that are very artistic as well, mostly in music. And for example, I have a sister-in-law who she's definitely a feeler. She's a musician. She sings vocals, and she's in a couple of bands. But for her, come on, Veronica, she would be Catholic if some certain circumstances were different.
Yeah.
And it's really the beauty of the Mass, the church, and the music, is like Gregorian chant, things like that, that have really pulled her in to Catholicism. And even with my sister, I have a twin sister who won't leave the church, really. Like she's not practicing, but she won't leave. And I think a lot of the beauty that can be found within the church is the reason why she stays. So I find it interesting that for you, that's given, get what you said earlier about experiencing healing through being able to experience that artwork in Europe really transformed or initiated that healing process for you. So what are some things that like helped you cultivate your artwork growing up? Like, what did your parents do things to support you? I'm just imagining there are some parents out there who are like, I have this really gifted child. What do I do to help them in the right direction,
I'm sorry. By the way, I'm impressed that you can do this, both things at once.
I have a lot of I do a radio show every week as well, and I've been doing it for about 6 years. So
You're a pro.
I'm just used to this. Yep, and I've had kids for like for the last 5 years doing this. So yeah, thanks.
Embrace it. You're doing great. One of the unforeseen blessings of becoming a professional Catholic illustrator, as opposed to just doing my professional creative work, is I'm having Catholic parents send me messages all the time about exactly what you're saying. Like, I have this very talented teen and I don't really know how to help them to the next stage or what feedback to give them. And that was my experience too. I mean, like I said, my dad was a Marine. I remember him asking me as a teenager, like, what are you going to do with your life? I'm basically sitting here at my desk all day drawing. Like, what are you going to do for a living? And I remember telling him, well, I'm going to be an artist. And he was kind of like, that's not a job. You need to have a backup plan. How about the Marines? Stuff like that. And so he didn't know what to do with me. It's not his fault. It just wasn't part of his nature. He didn't understand it. But honestly, it was just something in me. I can't even take credit for it. If I can do anything good or any of this work is good, it came from God. I don't know. Honestly, what it is. It could be possibly because we did move around so much, and I had to find something to do with myself in between those times of not having friends and having to meet new friends, and it was just a way to express kind of the things in my world at the time. And I really didn't, other than just being dedicated and loving doing it, I didn't really have any true formation. Even my time going back to school, it was graphic design focused. It wasn't illustration focused, wasn't fine art focused. And I rushed that in 2 years just so I could get my foot in the door in a corporation. So I really just think it's having a love for it and never giving up. I mean, those were the two big things. I couldn't give it up if I wanted. I did set it aside for a while just because we got busy with family and career, but it wasn't something I can't like take that part of me away, and
right.
It's just in me. So
yeah, that is, I think all of us, like, our innate vocations, I think are kind of revealed to us, at least for me, I think for many of us, there are little fragments of it, like along the
Hints,
way,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know? I
Glimpses, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember even as a young child, staring out the window, it must have been like spring or early summertime, and deciding that my favorite color was the color green because it was a sign of life to me.
Yeah.
And then several years later, I've spent most of my time doing pro-life work
Mm.
for the last, I mean, over a decade now. Can you, a quick question, can you
Yeah.
hear my little guy screaming back there?
Yeah, I like it.
I'm like,
That's real life. That's real life. I
I
like
might
it.
have to help him out here in
No,
a
yeah,
minute.
please do. Please do. Yeah, if you
Yeah,
need to.
he's such like he's 2, so like there's that, but he's also just been my most difficult kid in
That's more
general.
important. So if I need to hold here, I can.
Okay, I'll go and figure out what he
Yeah.
wants. I'm sure he's just my ragey kid. That's why I'm so used to ignoring him. So,
Yeah. No,
so
you're
I'll be
good.
right back.
Who's this one?
This is Elijah. Can
Hi, Elijah.
you say hi to Chris? No? Okay,
Oh no. Okay.
just don't look. Ah, okay, so where were we? So then, like, is there anything parents can do? I mean, it sounds like people are reaching out to you asking this question, like, how do
Mm.
we support? I mean, is it just like give them unfettered access to like sketch pads and pencils and stuff like that? Like, how do parents support their kids? Because, I think your dad's reaction is very common, right? I mean, I think a lot of parents they don't see the value in art.
Yeah.
And that speaks to a deeper cultural issue, and I think that's why kind of our modern world is very ugly.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like, how has that formed you over the, because it must be hard to be an artist and live in a very ugly time.
Have
Like,
you been
I think
listening
it's
to my
ugly.
private conversations? Like, this is my wife and I are talking about this all of the time. We live in an ugly city, I'll be honest, and not necessarily Atlanta, but where we are, there's no beauty here, and it starts to really like drain your spirit, your
Yeah.
soul. And it's interesting. I read a book a number of years ago from somebody who would go around to schools and teach art, and he would do all the elementary grades up to high school, and he would go in for these classes, and he'd say in kindergarten, like, who here wants to be an artist when they grow up, and like all the kids would raise their hand. And over the years, every year as it gets older, less and less kids raise their hand, and by the time you get to high school, you might have like one person raise their hand. And it's kind of a shame because there really is an artist in everybody. I mean, we are just creative beings to begin with, even in just like having families and raising families is a creative endeavor. In a way, it's participating in that creative spirit of God, but it's also the creativity of God as well. And yeah, sometimes I think it is just having an unfettered access to a sketch pad and some crayons and some markers. I mean, having those things accessible so that anytime that stuff's out here in my house and my kids come across a blank piece of paper and they see some crayons, it's going to get colored on. And if it doesn't, you're probably going to have your walls colored on. It's just natural for them.
How is it possible they always find the permanent markers and the walls?
Yeah,
Like, why is that? Or the floors? I feel like it's just
floors
never on
too.
paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good thing to foster. Maybe not on the walls. Maybe curb that. But like, yeah, if you can give them paper and just embrace that creativity. We try to do things with them all the time that keep them creative and looking at the world in new ways and creative ways. We get busy sometimes though, and we forget about that. And we'll notice it in the kids, like when they're drawing and when they're like just being the creative little geniuses that they are. Like, they're happy. When they don't have that stuff, they kind of get grumpy.
Do you think that the fact that everything is on screens all the time and we don't let kids ever be bored? Like,
Yeah.
I know that there's a lot of research out there that indicates that kids need boredom in their lives and it does help foster creativity. Would you say that this has kind of been your experience as well?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So we have some older ones and we have some younger ones, and we have a wide spread. And we weren't at the place we are now where when we had our first one, we had the TV in the main room and we had shows that we would put on from time to time. That after she was born, TV's gone. We cut her cable. We don't watch, we'll do a family movie every once in a while, but the culture has become a receptive culture where some people out there deciding that they're going to have this story that they're going to tell, and they're the ones that are going to force feed it down into kids, and just streaming it into their faces all day long, whether it's videos or games or whatever. The parents are putting them in front of this, and it's very subjective. It's very receptive, subjective. It's not the kids expressing their creativity, the things that they're feeling, and those sorts of things. And absolutely, that's crucial for a creative, beautiful, art focused culture. I mean, you need to practice that like anything else. Everybody needs those creative outlets, and I think you're onto something there. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I am. And I'm like interviewing you. My kids are watching Moana, I'm pretty sure right now. Um, my other kids, the ones that
Yeah.
aren't napping or screaming at me. Um, you know, yeah, I mean, it's like, it's hard because as parents, you're wanting to walk a balance. If it were up to me, I probably watch 3 movies a year. I mean,
Yeah.
I almost
Me too.
never watch TV. I don't much care for it because I think that even our movies are ugly. Everything is ugly, and the themes are so dark right now, I feel like for a lot of it.
It's very
Um,
vapid. There's nothing of substance to it.
yeah.
They put these engaging exteriors on it, and the graphics look cool and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
then you get down to substance, and there's nothing. There's no there, and
It makes me feel yucky. Like I want things that are edifying and like building my soul, and I feel like there's not a lot of that because it is lacking in beauty. Like at the
yeah,
core of it, we want things that are good, beautiful, and true. And that's what we're made for. And so when it's not that, you just, I find it too. There's this weird fascination right now with like horror films and
mhm,
horror shows and things like that. And I think it just really speaks to like this darkness and like this hole, right? Like we have in sacred scripture, he talks about, in the gospels, Christ talks about the person who cleans out his house of the demons and then 7 more comes back because he
mhm,
doesn't fill it with anything good.
right,
Right. And it's like, I just feel like that's where we're at. We're in a culture that has no religion. I mean, no real religion. They themselves are gods. We're all our
mhm.
own gods these days. And then you're like, well, that's not true. So you're already lacking truth, and there's no good in that. There's no good in being your own god. You're like, well, what's left? Let's just attack beauty. We'll make everything really ugly. Um,
Well, the devil can't make anything. He can only distort and
and mock.
manipulate and tear
Yes.
down and mock, and that was the MTV culture that I started to realize, like that was putting a real stain on my soul. So as I got older, I stopped listening to some of the music I used to listen to. I stopped watching certain kinds of movies, and I started to realize that when I would from time to time go back and like hear one of the songs like years later, or catch a glimpse of a movie that was kind of in the vein of the stuff I used to watch, it was like, I don't understand this anymore. This is a different language.
Mm,
And I think the reason why we see ugly cities and ugly movies and terrible music is because it's a reflection of the soul of the people who are making it.
mm-hmm.
The souls are not happy. The culture is not happy. And so they're not going to make beautiful things. I
Mm-hmm.
heard once, and I'm not going to do justice to rephrasing this in any kind of eloquent way, but like all of the good movies and all the good art that we see is really just a retelling of the gospel story. At its core,
Mm,
you break the things down. You have this heroic sacrificial figure. You have the figure of Christ at the core of it. All stories that resonate with you and that actually speak to the heart in a very deep and profound way are Christ centered stories. And I found that interesting. I don't remember where I gleaned that, but they put words to what I knew was already true, and
right.
and now I'm conscious of it, and I see it, and I'm like, oh, that movie resonates with me. Lord of the Rings resonates with me because
Yeah,
there are
right.
Christian themes there, right? So
Oh yeah, and that's why, you can't help but love the Chronicles of Narnia. I'm reading that to my kids. I was just reading Prince Caspian to
yeah,
my oldest daughter this morning at the breakfast table. Well, and I think this is also really important because we become what we consume. We
yeah,
know that as Catholics with the context of the Eucharist, but it's not just the Eucharist, it's everything.
hmm,
Like you become what you consume, and even you become a little bit the people you spend time with. I mean,
oh,
it's like,
absolutely, yeah,
it's like you're always taking in things and we're meant to engage it, right? Like you said, we're creative creatures.
hmm,
Um and if we're not creating beautiful things, you're not giving anything of substance for other people to receive. and no one's giving that back to you either. So it's like, yeah, you just sort of descend into banality,
Yeah,
right?
and you're passing back and forth the degradation of our beings, of our soul, you
Right.
know? Like everything is degraded and we're just passing that back and forth and it's never going anywhere. It's just keeping us stuck. And I definitely experienced that in my life. I've like I said, I found the religious art extremely cathartic, healing, and it also inspired in me a will and a desire to just like to find more of the beauty
Mm.
that speaks to me and be able to represent those things for other people. So I agree with that entirely. Yeah.
So where have you found that? Like, where do you look when you need to be inspired and look at things that are good, beautiful, and true? Where do you go?
First and foremost, I know like this is like something that every Christian's supposed to say, but I really mean it. The Bible. Like I
Yeah.
just
It speaks
every
to your heart. How
it
can it
really
not?
it really does. I mean, it hits every facet of human experience.
Mm,
And one of the things I got wrong when I was a Protestant is thinking that everything in there was literal, like it was and I know we have a different way of understanding literal in the Catholic sense, but I
right.
mean we thought what you read in plain English is what it says is what it means. Well, it's
And
becoming
that it's not
Catholic.
layered. Yeah.
Exactly, and now I see the Bible as layered, vertically. There's meaning upon meaning upon meaning, and I just find when I start digging into that stuff and I start referencing it with the fathers and things like that, it just like sets me on fire. So there's definitely that aspect of it. I've not been a good reader. I'm a reader of history, and I find some inspiration there too. But oftentimes it's more of like the failings of humanity. But in those cases where you see something amazing, I mean, that's always where people step above their natures and do something that is really like a reflection of Christ. All that kind of stuff is of course inspiring. But lately, I've never been much of a fiction reader, and I'm trying to get into some of the classics, and I'm even finding inspiration there. Things like the Divine Comedy is, of course, like
Oh,
a
yeah.
masterpiece. And I have to say, like my introduction to that wasn't so much the reading because I was formed by the culture and by public school, so I didn't even know what to make of that stuff until I came
Yeah.
across like Gustave Dore's illustrations of it, and that
That's so
really,
funny. I was drawn to his work in college. I
yeah,
remember taking an art history class and going to the Minneapolis Institute of Art for like a project.
yeah,
And I was so drawn into by his work, and I knew nothing about him at the time, but I
mm,
remember like writing about his work for my class and going back later and learning so much more about him and being like, "Well, of course, this makes so much sense."
yeah, and I don't. Maybe I came across him when I was not Catholic, but it wasn't until I was Catholic that I stumbled upon him, and he's like an artist that like speaks perfectly to my heart. So like when I
Mm.
saw his Divine Comedy, I kind of joked that like the Divine Comedy is like my favorite book that I've never read, and it's like the book I really want to read and understand. And I've found some things online that have kind of helped navigate me through that. So anyway, I'm trying to get into those classics because I do see a value in just the way that the ancient world saw the world and reality, and I don't quite understand it even in this late age of mine. I'm beginning to try and understand these things like through philosophy and all that, but I find a lot of inspiration there. Just people who see us for what we are but can see that there's something beyond it and something that's really,
Mm.
there is something to elevate us, an end. We have a purpose. And when you read those things in history where people are fulfilling their purpose, or you read it in scripture, it's just that's the stuff I love. I say that Baritus is dedicated to truth, goodness, and beauty, and so I try and get that wherever I can.
Well, like I said, I am super grateful for your work. I've encountered it. I know you've done some work for authors like Daria Little in her book, From Islam to Christ.
Mhm.
That cover is beautiful on that book.
Oh, that was the Latin Mass actually, but she's the author of,
Oh,
yeah,
oh, okay. You did the Latin Mass explained too.
yeah,
Well, that makes
yeah,
sense too, because
yeah, yeah.
that cover is also beautiful. I have both, and I recommend both for anyone who's not familiar with her work. But then you have shirts, work, and tons of artwork. Like we have, I love your St. Joseph Terror of Demons. We hung that outside my son's room because he gets a lot of like bad dreams.
Yeah.
And he prays now every night at bedtime. He will say St. Joseph Terror of Demons, and he will wait for me or my husband to say, pray for us.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
and even in here, you probably can't see, but I have the one of St. Joseph protecting Our Lady. Yeah, and some other ones too, actually, around the house. So anyway, love your work. Where can people find your work?
The best place to go is probably just barituscatholic.com. You can link to social media
Oh
where
yeah,
I'm the most active. Like Instagram is where I keep up the most, and I'll post new work there and
yeah.
talk about new things in the shop. But you can also link to my shop through that Baritus
And you
Catholic.
even have like phone case
Yeah,
covers.
yeah.
I mean, the only stickers on my car are from you. I have all the hearts, the Sacred Heart of Jesus, the most chaste heart of Saint Joseph, and the Immaculate Heart of Mary on our car, and the Memento Mori.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, like I said, I've wanted to interview you for a long time because it's been hard to find good Catholic art that I look at and think, wow, that's really inspiring. The style is beautiful and really does a great job of marrying traditional elements with kind of a modern twist. So I've
Mhm.
really appreciated that. Thank you so much for your work, Chris.
Yeah, no, it's a blessing, and like I said earlier, art is a great way to kind of speak to people's heart or start a conversation without hitting them over the head with like arguments for why you need to be Catholic. Like we have those arguments, but sometimes just
Hmm.
that openness to the beauty is the first step for people. And so hopefully these items are helping just take up some space in the culture and maybe raise some questions in people's heads, but also help people enrich their own Catholic devotions and their own faith and be proud of their faith. We have a lot to be proud of, and so yeah, it's a blessing to do this work, and thank you for inviting me on to talk about it.
Well, thanks for joining me, and I hope that you will come back on soon.
Absolutely, anytime. Thank you.
Awesome.
All right.